How does a single pilot survive against 3 enemy fighters in the freezing skies over the Eastern Front? And what happens when his ammunition runs out? On the morning of February 27, 1942, above the snow-covered forest near Vyazma, west of Moscow, a lone Soviet fighter pilot from the 177th Fighter Aviation Regiment found himself isolated, outnumbered, and hunted. The German Luftwaffe, flying Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters, had already established dominance in the region, sweeping the skies in coordinated patrols. But on that day, one Soviet pilot refused to retreat. What followed was not just a dogfight. It was a battle of endurance, instinct, and sheer willpower, fought thousands of meters above a frozen battlefield. And when his ammunition finally ran dry, he made a decision that would echo through history. By early 1942, the Eastern Front had become a brutal war of attrition. After the failure of Operation Barbarossa to capture Moscow, German forces were regrouping, while Soviet units launched desperate counteroffensives to push them back. The skies above this frozen battlefield were just as contested. The Soviet Air Force, still recovering from catastrophic losses in 1941, was rebuilding rapidly. New pilots were being rushed into combat with minimal training. Aircraft like the Yakovlev Yak-1 were sturdy and maneuverable, but often outmatched in experience by seasoned German aces flying the Bf-109F. The 177th Fighter Aviation Regiment had been tasked with protecting ground forces near Vyazma. Their mission was simple: intercept German reconnaissance aircraft and disrupt fighter sweeps. Among their ranks was a young but determined pilot, Lieutenant Alexei Petrov. At just 23 years old, he had already flown over 60 combat sorties. He was not yet an ace, but he had survived long enough to understand one critical truth. In the skies over Russia, survival was victory. On that February morning, Petrov and his wingmen were scrambled at 0900 hours after reports of German aircraft approaching Soviet lines. The temperature hovered around minus 20 degrees Celsius. The air was sharp, biting, and unforgiving. Engines struggled. Metal creaked under stress. Visibility was clear, but that only made the danger more immediate, because in clear skies, there was nowhere to hide. By 09:15 hours, Petrov's Yak-1 had climbed to 4,500 meters. The vast expanse of white below stretched endlessly, broken only by thin lines of forest and the occasional plume of artillery smoke. Moments later, his wingman spotted them. 3 dark shapes. Fast, closing, German fighters. The Messerschmitt Bf-109s approached in a loose formation, using the sun to mask their position. Veteran pilots, disciplined, patient, 3 against 2. But within seconds, the situation worsened. A burst of machine gun fire tore through the sky. Petrov's wingman was hit almost immediately, his aircraft trailing black smoke as it spiraled downward. Petrov was alone. The German pilots split their formation, executing a classic pincer maneuver. One climbed higher, preparing to dive. The other 2 flanked him from either side. Petrov reacted instantly. He rolled hard to the left, pulling into a tight climbing turn. The Yak-1's agility became his only advantage. The heavier German aircraft struggled to match his sharp maneuver. Tracers streaked past his cockpit. Close. Too close. By 0920 hours, the dogfight had fully erupted. The sky became a chaotic ballet of speed and violence. Engines roared, guns rattled. The thin air carried the sharp crack of machine gun fire. Petrov dove, then climbed, then rolled again, constantly moving, never predictable. He knew the rules. Never fly straight, never hesitate. The first German pilot made a mistake. Overconfident, he pushed too aggressively, closing the distance without anticipating Petrov's sudden break. Petrov seized the moment. He pulled into a tight turn, lining up his guns. For a brief second, the German fighter filled his sights. He fired. A burst of 20mm cannon shells and machine gun rounds struck the enemy aircraft. Smoke erupted from its engine. The Messerschmitt veered sharply, losing altitude, 1 down. But the fight was far from over. The remaining 2 German fighters adapted quickly. They tightened their coordination, taking turns diving and climbing, forcing Petrov into a defensive spiral. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. By 0930 hours, Petrov's aircraft had taken minor hits. Warning lights flickered. His controls felt heavier, sluggish. His ammunition count was dropping rapidly. Every burst had to count. The Germans pressed harder. One attacked from above, forcing Petrov to dive. The other waited below, ready to strike. It was a trap. Petrov pushed his aircraft to its limits. The Yak-1 shuddered under the strain as he pulled a high G turn, narrowly avoiding another burst of gunfire. The distance between life and death was now measured in meters and seconds. By 0940 hours, Petrov was exhausted. Sweat froze against his skin. His gloved hands tightened around the controls. His breathing grew heavier. The German pilots showed no signs of slowing. They were hunting him, methodically, relentlessly. His ammunition counter dropped lower, 50 rounds, then 30, then less. Petrov scanned the sky, searching for an opening. But the Germans had learned. They kept their distance, avoiding unnecessary risks. They knew time was on their side. At 0945 hours, one of the Bf-109s made another attack run. Petrov fired. A short burst. Missed. He adjusted. Fired again. A hit, but not enough. The German fighter pulled away, still operational. Petrov checked his ammunition, almost gone. The realization hit him like a shockwave. He was alone, damaged, outnumbered, and now, unarmed. The next pass came quickly. Tracers tore past his cockpit. His aircraft shuddered violently as rounds struck the fuselage. A warning alarm screamed. Fuel line hit. Smoke began to seep into the cockpit. Petrov coughed, his vision blurring. The German fighters closed in, preparing for the final strike. For a moment, everything seemed to slow. The roar of the engine, the flicker of warning lights, the endless white expanse below. This was how it ended, or so it seemed. But Petrov was not ready to die. Not like this. Not without a fight. With his ammunition depleted, Petrov made a decision that defied logic and embraced desperation. He would use his aircraft itself as a weapon, a maneuver known among Soviet pilots as Taran. Ramming. It was a last resort, a near-suicidal act. But in the chaos of war, it had become a symbol of defiance. Petrov spotted his target. One of the German fighters had just completed a dive and was climbing back up, exposed, vulnerable for a brief moment. Petrov pushed his damaged Yak-1 forward. The engine screamed in protest. The distance closed rapidly. The German pilot saw him coming, but too late. Petrov aimed not for the cockpit, but for the tail section. A precise strike, a chance to disable, without immediate destruction. At 0948 hours, the two aircraft collided. The impact was violent. Metal tore. Wood splintered. The sky exploded with debris. The German fighter's tail was severed, sending it spiraling out of control. Petrov's aircraft shuddered, nearly breaking apart. For a moment, it seemed impossible that anything could survive such a collision. But somehow, he did. Barely in control, Petrov struggled to stabilize his aircraft. The remaining German pilot, stunned by what he had just witnessed, hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Petrov dove. His damaged aircraft descended rapidly, smoke trailing behind. The German pilot did not pursue. Perhaps it was shock, perhaps it was respect, or perhaps it was fear. Petrov managed to bring his crippled Yak-1 down in a rough landing just behind Soviet lines. The aircraft was destroyed, but he survived, bruised, burned, exhausted, alive. Out of the 3 German fighters, one was confirmed destroyed, another crippled beyond recovery, and the third forced to disengage. Against impossible odds, a single pilot had outlasted them all. In the weeks that followed, Petrov's story spread throughout the regiment. It became a symbol of resilience, of courage, of the unbreakable will to fight, even when all seemed lost. He was later awarded the Order of the Red Banner for his actions. But more than the medal, it was the story that endured. A reminder that in the vast, brutal skies of the Eastern Front, victory was not always measured in firepower or numbers. Sometimes, it was measured in sheer determination. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.